is Paula is going to give us an introduction to the session, and then we will go to breakout rooms. Paula will explain the breakout rooms. As I say, use the chat facility. The chat facility will go in the breakout rooms, but the idea of the breakout rooms is that we can actually talk to each other, which is quite novel. All of the breakout rooms and this whole session will be recorded. So all of the resources, the presentations, everything will be made available after the session via the DCA website for you to re-listen to or share with colleagues. And I think that's all I've really got to say. As I say, if you do have any questions at the beginning or at the end when the chat facility is available, please use the chat facility, and Joe and myself will do our best to answer any questions there and then. If there is things that we don't know or we're unsure of or we've not come across before, then we will research them and they will be updated in the sort of resource that is made available after today's session via the website. So I think that's probably enough from me. Ray, if you're happy that we haven't had any new participants for a while, then I think we will start recording. Janet, I've just seen your thing about the breakout rooms. I think Paula will mention about how, if you couldn't choose one, how we've allocated you, and a bit more about that. So don't worry, all will be explained. I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to hand over to Paula for today's session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. So today we're going to be looking at managing recovery, so that restarting, reopening, or for some of you it might just be moving back to your more normal business and away from the major sort of COVID response that you might have been working with. The primary focus of today's session is around income generating services. So that's the parts of your business that generate an income for your charity, your CIC, your group. So that's going to be a primary focus. Now, that doesn't mean that a lot of this won't still be relevant to any other group that relies on funding from other means. And not to forget the very important function of fundraising, which is probably one of the main ways that groups generate an income. So what do we mean when we talk about recovery planning? Well, I've actually stolen this from a slide from an earlier presentation that we did on recovery planning. Which, if you want to know more on that particular subject, go back to our webinar page and have a look at our recording and our resources. But really, recovery is about moving from the stage we're in now to whatever the new normal is going to look like. So it doesn't mean necessarily back to the business that you ran before. It could mean a complete refresh for what you're doing. So there are an awful lot of questions that you will need to ask as a group to make sure that you are prepared for that next stage. It isn't just a case of opening the doors and assuming business will be the same as it was. That's not how it's going to work. When you know the kind of changes, the kind of adaptations that you're going to need to make to your normal way of doing business, you're probably going to be finding yourselves with a funding shortfall. If you need to buy more IT equipment, if you need to invest in webcams or microphones or headsets or better laptops so that you can communicate virtually, or if you're going to need to put signage up, which is going to be very common in most workplaces, how are you going to fund that? Now, it might be, if you've been mothballed, you've been able to secure or ring fence some funding, which you'll be able to make use of when you restart. I don't think that's going to be the case for an awful lot of groups as they go into this brand new, bold future. I think we're going to need funding. So you're going to need to start looking around before you reopen for some of the funding that is going to help you. Now, of course, what you can do is you can push your donations. So you can go back to customers, you can go back to donors in the past and ask them if they'll support you with your relaunch. So you can make that part of your fundraising. You can look at what funding is available under the COVID-19. Some are going to have specific flavours of recovery. I know that Dorset Community Foundation plan to move into a phase 2 of their funding, which will actively enhance recovery. But actually, as you restart into the world as it is now, you're still going to be part of that COVID response, particularly if part of your audience is the shielded or people that are not going to be coming out of this crisis as quickly as other people. So do recognise that when you're looking at funding, you are going to be part of the COVID response, even if you haven't been up until now. And probably one of the very important things to remember is that the government will dictate the stage that we're at. I think, forgive me if I've got his name wrong, but I think it's Mike Ashford, who does Sports Direct, was on the news quite a bit over the last couple of days, sort of ranting a little bit that they've spent a lot of money getting themselves ready to open on the 1st of June. Well, one thing that's been made very clear by the government guidance is all of the dates that they've given out are based upon the R rate, which is part of the infection rate and also the reproduction rate of the virus. It's all dependent on those, how quickly these things happen. So although we've been given preliminary dates, although we've got some ideas that we're working towards, it could all change. So you need to be keeping an eye on what the government are saying, no pun intended, what the government are saying about the R, and that will dictate when things open. So that's really important. Don't go seeing these dates like the 4th of July as carved in stone, working towards it, and then finding, oh my God, we're not prepared. We haven't got a plan B if we don't reopen. So the aim is to plan for gradually restarting. You should be looking at a phased return of some description. Even if that phase is over the course of a week, you still need to phase it, because there are going to be lots of individual actions that need to take place before you can even start your business, or there are going to be lots of changes and adaptations. And if you've been running at the moment on kind of emergency principles, so good safeguarding, but really running to keep going, you probably have missed some of the health and safety guidance that's come out. So even for organisations that are currently offering services, you need to make sure that you're working within the now produced health and safety guidance. That kind of, I was going to say excuse, but not really excuse, but that kind of modus operandi of emergency. So actually we do the best that we can. Some of that won't be the case now. Some of it we've got to follow the guidance that's out there. The other reason why phased is so important is that you've got to try and keep your costs as low as possible while your income will be at its lowest. Seems really obvious, but if you restart in one big go, your costs are going to be through the roof and you're not necessarily going to have income to match. People are not necessarily going to be banging on your door. I think Sports Direct might be all right on that one, but they're not necessarily going to be banging on your door demanding that you open. So you could find yourself caught in that high cost without income coming in. So when we talk about phase planning, what does that look like? So it means highlighting the activities that you need to be thinking about. Now, this is a very, very crude plan, but it's really just to get the process kind of give you something to hold on to in your mind about it. So one of the first activities that you're going to need to look at is definitely risk assessments. Now, there's lots of government guidance. We've got the links in this particular presentation so that when it goes onto our website, you'll have all the links to working safely. If you've currently done a risk assessment for COVID, that's not going to stand you instead for when you restart. You're going to need to go back to this new guidance that's been given out by the government and make sure that your risk assessment still fits within that. You might find that you have to do a completely new one. Now, we all love risk assessments, so that's fine, and that won't be a worry for anybody. If, on the other hand, you're not so keen on risk assessments, remember that we are here, and we're here to help you, and we were here to, if we can, give you broad templates. HSE, so the Health and Safety Executive, also have blank risk assessment templates that you can use. And there is also some really, really good advice out there. One of the links that I've got, which I'll highlight later, is from the charity retail sector. And they've done some really good risk assessment planning around reopening a charity shop. And I have to say, I think it's so good that most venue-based organisations might benefit from looking at it. They've really done a really nice example. It's quite narrative driven rather than, you know, boxes, but actually it kind of incorporates both. It's worth having a look at. I'll highlight it when we come to it. So then you need to start thinking about, well, what is our date of reopening? Because we don't want to quietly relaunch. We want to relaunch with a bang. So we want people to know when to be expecting us. We want them to anticipate it, have desire. Think how exciting it's going to be that they're able to come back and view a museum, or that they're going to be able to safely plan a lunch in your museum shop. So you need to have good fixed dates that you're working towards, with flexibility in there, that if the government advice changes, you're not going to be left with astronomical costs. So the government are kind of doing what it looks like about sort of 2 weeks notice. So you probably want to book anything expensive like cleaning, for example, within that kind of window. As I said before, fundraising to make sure that you can pay for the things that you're planning. There will be some cleaning of premises. Now, even if you have been currently operational, you've probably had a majority of your staff working from home or volunteers. So there's going to be some cleaning that's needed. Now, a deep clean is only needed if you've had an incident of COVID. But if your premises have been sat stale for the last couple of months, trust me, you're going to need to clean it. And ventilation is going to be quite key there as well. Communications, please keep everybody informed. As you write these plans, share them with your staff, share them with your volunteers, let them know what's going on. And you're also going to have to plan training. There's going to be new ways of working for everybody. And it isn't going to be an excuse that your staff or volunteers didn't understand social distancing. You're not going to be able to say, well, it's been everywhere. Everybody knows about social distancing. It's not going to be good enough. You're going to have to show how you have supported your staff to understand how social distancing will work in your workplace, whatever that may be. So training is going to be of vital importance. And again, DCA is here to help you with that, whether it's putting training together, supporting you by delivering training, or it could be that actually we start to look at something that can be a base template that you can use for your own training. And signage, really, really important. It's one of the key focuses of all of the government updates and guidance is around having good signage in your workplace. So this goes beyond that kind of the hot water tap signage that we might be used to, or the exits, but this is actually good signage that is easy to find, that is replicated frequently within the premises around those key points, which are for a workplace, their social distancing, their hygiene, and they are making sure that we keep both employees and staff safe. So the signage will be very important. So when putting it together, what you'll start to do is timeline it. So this is, as I said, this is incredibly crude, but it's just to give you that idea. So the when is kind of so you can begin to put things in order to know what you need to do before you do that. Because otherwise what happens is you plan to reopen, you put all your stuff in place and then realize you're going to need fundraising. You've forgotten to inform staff that they're back off furlough within time for them to make arrangements to be able to come back. It's very important that we remember that if staff are furloughed, we can't use them. Can't use them for the bid writing, the risk assessment, the cleaning. We can't ask them to do any of those things. Trustees and directors, as volunteers, that does mean that you might be called on to help with quite a bit of this, or you might have to look at bringing an individual member of staff back from furlough in order to be able to plan for restarting. And again, that raises the question of fundraising. Can you get support to pay for that member of staff to come back to help? When we're talking about members of staff to come back, it's probably important to think about some key people beforehand. And the ones I'm just going to highlight now are those with childcare needs. You're going to need to be very sympathetic towards these for two reasons, really. One, because as we know, most school children are not at school. So there are new childcare needs for staff that haven't been there before. Also, as we move into the summer, where many would have planned summer activities for their children while they're still at work during the summer, those summer activities may not be running. And so you may have people who normally would organise childcare for their children during the summer period struggling. So again, really, really important that you consider those needs. There are a few options that you can look at. Annual leave is one, supporting working from home or reallocation of roles so that people can work from home. And then of course, there's also parental leave, which is 4 weeks of unpaid leave that all parents of a child up to the age of 18 are entitled to. They can take 4 weeks within a year out of an allotted 18 weeks for the whole allocation of their child. Normally, you would need to plan that up to 21 days in advance, but that isn't the case. I think for most employers, they've said that they would waiver the 21 days notice. But again, it all has to be done in discussion, but there are things that you can think about. Obviously, staff being unpaid when they're on leave causes financial difficulties for staff. So you would see those as kind of back pocket options. You've also got dependence leave, which you can make use of, but that's normally emergency based for a couple of days. But again, as an employer, these are things that you can put in place to support those people. We then got the clinically extremely vulnerable. This is where it always gets confusing. So I'm going to refer to them as shielded. These are the people who've been notified by their GP that they are currently shielded. We're going to have to make allowances for these people. We are going to have to work out how we can keep them employed without them coming back into a workplace. So that means looking at how we reallocate roles so that they can work from home or remain furloughed. Now, we know that the furlough situation is changing. Probably from the 1st of August, we'll be looking at some partial payment towards that. But again, it is necessary. And really, I don't think the government are planning for anybody who is shielded to be coming back to work initially. Now, it is worth mentioning that the current guidelines around shielding are only up to the end of June. So we will have to wait to see what the government say about shielding after the 30th of June. But I would say the feel is very much that that is going to go on longer. And then we have the clinically vulnerable. That's groups that are identified as being more vulnerable than most to the coronavirus, but they don't have that letter from the doctor. They're not currently shielded. Now, again, government guidance would seem to say that we should be protecting those people, particularly if they have protective characteristics, i.e. they're pregnant as well. And we should be, again, looking to make them able to work from home as much as possible, and putting in additional support for them to make working as safe as possible. So those are 3 areas that you're going to have to think about. And you're also going to need to plan for people that are self-isolating. Now, if they're self-isolating because they are sick or a member of their family or their household rather is sick, they can be covered under sick pay and should be covered under sick pay. Or if they're not sick, but they're displaying symptoms, they can, of course, continue to work from home. Okay. So when we talk about risk assessment, reducing risks, what are we really talking about? Well, I think probably the first thing I would do is look at a walkthrough. Imagine you're a member of staff coming back into your building, your facility, or their role for the day, and think of the different trigger points within their role where they might come into contact with another person or their risk might go up, and then make a note of those triggers. Those are the things that you're going to need to put something in place to reduce risk. And then do exactly the same process, but for a customer of your organization. How do they walk through your organization, whether that's an actual building or whether that's a service that you offer? And what would be the trigger points for the customer? I would see that as being a good starting point. Also, you want to identify new equipment, and again, link that to funding. So new equipment, new resources. If you're going to be looking at cleaning, is that something that you can look at as a funding bid in order to get you restarted? And you'll need to think about the allocation of teams. The recommendation from all of the guidance is that we try and keep the same people working together as much as possible. So not switching and changing. So you see 3 different members of staff as part of your working role within the course of a week, but you see the same people, because we know, again, that reduces the risk. So looking at teams and shift patterns is also very important. PPE often comes up. It's very, very clear in all of the guidance really that's come out that if you were not an organisation that used to use PPE before, you shouldn't be looking at PPE now. It's a very quick fix to sorting out a problem, and it can lead to complacency. It can lead to people slipping on things like social distancing and hygiene, which are much more important that people stick to. So actually PPE is not advised. We also know if everybody returning to work was to reach for PPE, we would have a shortage, a massive shortage for people that cannot eliminate the risk in any other way. So we have to keep PPE secure for people who cannot eliminate the risk in any other way. Face coverings is also talked about within all of the guidance that's been given by the government. It is worth highlighting that the evidence of it protecting you is weak, and the government themselves in the guidance do stress that. But it is there, and it is an option for people, and it is optional. It's not law, so we cannot force anybody to wear one. But at the same time, if a member of your staff wants to wear one, then that should also be supported, as long as they stick to the guidance that's there for using face masks, changing them if they've touched them. If they become damp, then they need to be changed. So as long as that member of staff is following the guidance around face coverings, then we should allow them to do so. And remember that face coverings only protect others from you. So if you have concerns that you are around people who might be susceptible to picking up the virus, then that might be the way that you want to be considerate to others, is to try and protect them as much as possible. It won't offer any protection to you. That's the difference between face coverings and PPE. Okay. So the working safely guidance has been broken down into individual places of employment around multiple areas, from construction to office work to retail. You need to keep an eye on it. It's very important you know where that page is so that you can see. If your industry is not currently on there, you shouldn't be open. So guidance we're being given is, when you're ready to open, you will see your guidance on there. So currently there is nothing around village halls, so that's a very clear indication that village halls shouldn't be open. So that's the kind of thing we should be looking at. They've got a very clear 5 steps to working safely, and I think this is a good starting point for anybody. It talks really about exactly what I've mentioned already today, but it gives you some good ideas that you can implement within your service. I'm not going to read these out. These slides will be available, so you will be able to just download them yourselves to read, or you can use the links to go directly to the guidance. You'll see probably the thing that they're highlighting most within all of these 5 steps is social distancing, hygiene, and then that teams idea of keeping the same people working together as a way of kind of minimizing the risk. And I think it's kind of working on the bubble philosophy that you may have seen being talked about in places like New Zealand, with this idea that actually if we can keep our worlds into bubbles of exposure, we actually reduce our risk. It's when we're out and about with random various people that actually the exposure risk goes up much more. So again, these links aren't there for the purpose of the presentation. It just means they're easy for you to find all on one slide when you come to our resource page. The one at the bottom here, the charityretail.org.uk, is probably the one I want to highlight the most. I do think it's really good. It's free access for everybody. It's a good example of how you can begin looking at risks and how you can mitigate risks. These are some of the key working safely guidance that is currently out there for the sort of industries that might link to what we're doing. There are others, so it's not an exhaustive list. Oops, so just going to go back, sorry, if it will let me go back. So it's not an exhaustive list, and I'm going to stop sharing at that point. So that is a quick whistle stop tour, but it really just hopefully gives you a little bit of a taster of what we're talking about when we're talking about recovery planning. So we're going to go now to the breakout rooms. So as some of you will already have highlighted, you weren't sure which room to put down to go to breakout in. Please don't worry about it. We haven't written anything in stone. We're not going to go around looking for ID to make sure that you do in fact have a venue and kicking anybody out that doesn't meet any criteria for entry. We're really good. We're nice bouncers. We're not the kind of people that are going to tell you to get on your bike. So we've split them into kind of arbitrary groups so that people are talking with like-minded people. But we appreciate not all of you will fit into nice little boxes. So most of the stuff that's being talked about is generic and will apply to trading, will apply to venues, will apply to fundraising. So the crossover is extraordinary, really. So what we've done is, what Rachel's been busy doing while I've been chattering away, is she's been busy putting you all into the groups that you requested, and where we haven't got a request from you, the one we think is most logical. My group, I think, is going to probably be a little bit more hodgepodge of different people that we weren't sure. I'm a bit hodgepodge myself, so that's good. People we weren't particularly sure what group they would go in. If in your group you think you're in the wrong place, you can leave and you'll meet Rachel, and Rachel will help allocate you to a new group. So if you feel, this is not the right place for me, just leave and we'll reallocate you. So when we go live with the breakout rooms, nothing will actually happen. We're not zapping you anywhere, at least we hope to God we're not. But what will happen is you will see yourself move into another space with another group of people. And you will be hosted either by myself, by Joe, or by Anita. And we will lead you through the discussion. And the aim being that we can draw out from you the concerns that you've got when it comes to this next phase, this reopening or changing from a COVID emergency response into a more normal kind of world that we'll be going into. Okay, so Rachel, if you would like to assign people to their breakout rooms. And we will
Sure
see
thing.
you all back here in 40 minutes. Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, I'll just press go. We've got 3 people that are going to stay in this room because I wasn't able to assign them. So everybody else, we shall see you shortly. Hopefully that worked. And then for the people that are left, if you can still hear me, I just couldn't work out, either your name didn't match the email address, or I couldn't see you somewhere on the list, or the system just sort of didn't seem to make it work. So if you want to just physically let me know, then I can put you in the right room, if that's helpful.
What are the rooms?
Sorry, so we've got the room for venues, so village halls, that kind of thing. We've got people that do activities, so if you've got a centre that's hiring your rooms out for groups, and then trading, so say like shops or anything that's that kind of thing.
Village halls, please.
Village halls, okay, I shall. Bye. Sorry, who? Emily. Then, where would you like to go?
I think that I'd have the most input in the trading side.
Yeah. Okay, I shall. That's Paula's group. So, yes, I shall assign you. Take care then. Who's next? Sorry, Wendy.
Yeah, can you put me, maybe it's the one with fundraising and kind of that and activities kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that, yes, so membership and stuff was counted as activities, so that would be the room 3. I think that's with Anita. So okay, take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I had requested to be in that one as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, because your name came up as Dorset Race Equality
Yeah,
Council.
no,
I didn't know who you were.
I know, it's the name of the account, so that's why.
Okay, so sorry,
Natalie.
you said activities and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because we don't have a building, but we hire buildings to run meetings and events and stuff
okay.
like that. So.
I'll pop you into that room then. Okay, you take care. Sorry, Jacqueline, who would you like to go with?
I did actually request for room 3.
Oh, okay, fine, thank you. I think it's just because the names, it's just tricky with the names, the way things
that's fine.
So sorry, room 3. Take care then.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Probably the trading room.
Ben, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, trading room. Can you hear me?
I don't know why. I can't seem to find you. It doesn't seem like your account has logged in properly or something. Can I ask you an enormous favour? If you, it might be best if you leave the meeting and then rejoin, just because I can see you're there, but I can't see you're there. So I could see your name on our list, but I couldn't find you.